Hi, my name is Matt Cusic, and this is my community service learning project. My community service learning, I went to Montevideo Middle School just outside of Harrisonburg 1 to 2 times a week to work with Hannah and Jay, two wonderful students with disabilities. I assisted with PE, art, and sometimes picking out their breakfast and lunch menus for the following weeks to come. The population that is being served is students with disabilities, meaning that students I worked with were, in one way or another, severely hindered in what they could do at school. The atmosphere that I worked in was a very comforting scene, and the people and students who I worked with were incredible. The students who I worked with were in a separate classroom from the gen ed classes due to the severity of their disabilities. My interactions with Hannah and Jay were always incredible, and always in such different ways. When I would read them a book or just talk to them in general, the biggest thing I noticed was that when I purposely vary the pitch of my voice, that is when I would get the most attention from them. Oftentimes, I would find that they would lose interest if I acted like I lost interest, as in reading a book to them. I experienced the same type of energy correlation between Hannah and Jay and myself when we were in PE, art, and picking out breakfast and lunch. The more engaged I was and the more fun I seemed to be having, it was mostly matched by them. I found this to be absolutely amazing because it goes to show that Jay and Hannah really enjoyed themselves when I seemed to be enjoying myself as well. The best experience for me wasn't a single occurrence, it was more just the eye-opening experience that I had and the clearing up of misconceptions and preconceptions. The worst and most challenging experience go hand in hand, and it was when I would see Hannah and Jay get frustrated with tasks and tripping up on things that I know that they could do. The biggest thing that I immediately noticed right off the bat was how different it was to see the difference between what goes on in a gen ed classroom versus a separate classroom specifically for students with disabilities. Another thing I noticed was the collaboration that goes on between teachers and parents and families. As a part of working with Hannah and Jay, at the end of every day I was there, whether or not it was PE or art, my community service learning partner had us discuss on a Google Doc what we did on that day and what we noticed about Hannah and Jay. The reason she had us do this was so she could share it with Hannah and Jay's parents for them to see what they are involved in at school and the progress they're making. As I learned in lecture, parents have the greatest vested interest in seeing their child learn, and they want to be involved in their children's education. This opportunity gave their parents that chance. I think what I learned in the service learning experience was overall pretty similar to what I learned in class. It's just more of a matter of being able to apply what you learn in class to the situation that's presented. I gained a lot of insight as to why each child, given the same characteristics, requires different levels of attention and care. For example, Jay and Hannah had different disabilities, but they both displayed similar levels of what they were capable of and what they needed a little bit more help with. There were some differences, however. For example, Hannah needed little to no assistance when it came to eating and drinking during lunch. She could pretty much do everything on her own, while Jay needed a little bit more help, and I believe this stemmed from a lack of fine motor skills. The point of this example, however, is to acknowledge that students are not defined by their disabilities, and if you focus on their disability, you're going to miss out on all the wonderful things that the child can do. I definitely did clarify an interest, and that is working with kids. I've always loved kids, but prior to this experience, I didn't think I would ever want a future working with them. After my service learning experience, I can definitely see myself working in a school setting. Initially, the biggest surprise I came across was when I found out that I would only be working with 2 students. Although I was taken by surprise by it, I now completely understand why I was only working with 2 students. Students with disabilities as severe as Jay and Hannah's require a lot of attention and individual one-on-one work. My experience was much more interactive than I anticipated, meaning that what I did in PE and art is very hands-on with the students. In PE, I mainly worked with Hannah, and in art, I worked more heavily with Jay. In PE, because Hannah's motor skills aren't the best, I would physically do things like hold a ball for her and throw it, or hold a ring for her and try to toss it on the target. In art with Jay, his motor skills were slightly more compromised than Hannah's, so I would really guide him with his pencil, pen, and paintbrush strokes. What I definitely found to be the critical incidents were when Jay responded more heavily to movement and when Hannah responded more heavily to sound. Typically, Jay always responded to sound and Hannah pretty much always to movement. So when either of them would respond to the other one, I thought it was a very big deal. I really liked the experience as a whole. I loved my community service learning partner, Miss Bailey, the students, Hannah and Jay, the student peers, as well as the JMU students I worked with. There's nothing that I really disliked about the experience, but if I chose something, it would probably be how limited my knowledge was about the disabilities Jay and Hannah had. Jay has a deletion of the 19th chromosome, and he was born with a deformation where the head and spine connect. Hannah has Dandy Walker syndrome and vertigo.